Guys, we've got a problem. I came across this problem while I was setting up my random debut draft the other day. I was going through the players when I came across one that made me stop in my tracks. I'll be frank with you, this problem has kept me up at night before I did this project, mind you. And no, I'm not kidding, and it was the same player. I'll call this the Lefty Grove problem. Now, this is a problem that nobody in the community talks about, at least not to my knowledge. This is a problem that runs deep within our replays and yet is one that we don't think about at all. We assume in our ignorance that there's no problem here. The problem is that we ignore the minor leagues. Now, you're probably wondering why in the world I'd call that a problem. Most of us only care about replaying major league seasons, right? Who cares about how some random player you've never heard of did in some league you don't know anything about? But there is a problem here. The problem is that the nature of baseball history means that some players have a natural disadvantage in certain projects. You probably know more about Grove's story than I do. Now, he was born in the mountainous village of Lonaconing, Maryland. I guess it's technically a town, that's what Wikipedia says, though I'm not sure how it qualifies as one. Its population right now is right around 1,000. It wasn't much bigger back when Grove was born. Now, to read about Grove's minor league career is to discover a part of baseball that we've lost. It's a kind of America that has been dying out for decades. Lonaconing itself is a great symbol of the decline of old rural America. Old, drab, falling apart. Legend has it that Grove didn't play what we would consider proper baseball until he was 19. He grew up playing a sandlot game with balls of black tape wrapped around a cork stopper and a wool sock, one that used fence pickets when there weren't any bats. Now, word has it that his father drew a representation of home plate on the side of the family barn, against which Grove would spend hours throwing rocks, honing his craft. Now, I think about that all the time when my wife tells my kids, hey, stop playing with games inside, go outside. You wonder, what did people do back before there was television, back before there was radio? Yeah, they would throw rocks on the side of the barn. He began his organized career pitching for a general store team in the nearby town of Midland, Maryland. Before long, he caught the eye of the team in Martinsburg, West Virginia, which back then was in the Class D Blue Ridge League. And that's where Grove's professional career began back in 1920. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find much about Grove's purchase by Martinsburg. I was able to find 2 Martinsburg Evening Journal articles from late March 1920 that mentioned Grove, both of which clearly state that he was already a phenom. Now, legend has overtaken fact as it usually does. If you read what the Sabre biography says, you would think that Martinsburg was halfway through the season by the time Jack Dunn in Baltimore heard about Lefty Grove. Actually, Martinsburg had just barely started the season. Grove was rumored to have been sold to Baltimore as early as June 23, 1920, and was definitively reported as sold on June 26th. Lefty made an instant impact with the Orioles, and that impact lingered as he stayed on with the club over the years. That's right, years. The man who arguably was the greatest left-handed pitcher of all time stayed with the club for years. He pitched for the Orioles from 1920 through the end of the 1924 season. Now, Jack Dunn was fiercely independent. He didn't want to sell his stars for nothing, and the Orioles played incredible baseball as a result. Baltimore won 110 games in 1920, 105 in 1921, 115 in 1922, 111 in 1923, and 117 in 1924. Lefty was finally sold to Connie Mack and the Philadelphia Athletics at the end of the 1924 season. It was actually in early October. Legend has it that Dunn decided it was time to sell his star pitcher when word came that the International League would finally become part of the minor league draft of the time. That meant that his stars could be taken away from him for only $5,000 each. Grove was sold for $100,600, which was more money at that time than any other player had ever been sold for, including Babe Ruth in 1920. Ruth, of course, who was originally another Dunn find. And Lefty Grove was worth every penny. So much for the history of Lefty Grove in the minors. But where's the problem, you ask? Well, the problem is that Grove didn't reach the major leagues until age 25. Now, I know that he wasn't necessarily an old man by that time, but it really makes a difference, especially in a random debut league. He really should have been in the majors at age 20 or maybe at age 21. He was a dominant pitcher and everybody knew it. Heck, he even shut down the Philadelphia Athletics in an early September 1924 exhibition game. He shut them out on only 2 hits. And the thing is, it wasn't just Grove. Ever hear of Johnny Ogden? Baseball Reference lists him as Jack. He appeared in only 5 games for the 1918 New York Giants before he went to Baltimore. He was a great star pitcher for the Orioles and stayed there until the hapless St. Louis Browns picked him up in 1928 when he was 30 years old. He would get no credit at all in our random debut for his dominance in the minors without at least some kind of intervention. Rube Parnham had 6 appearances for the Philadelphia Athletics between 1916 and 1917. He was a mainstay of the great Orioles teams, including winning both ends of a doubleheader on the last day of the 1923 season, a year in which he won 33 games and was the ace over Lefty Grove. He left baseball for good in 1924. Jack Bentley was an absolutely famous minor league star for the Orioles between 1917 and 1923, where he played first base when he wasn't pitching. He went to the New York Giants in 1923 and was a good pitcher, but his batting dominance, which included a .412 average and 597 at-bats in 1921, that dominance doesn't count if you don't look at his minor league stats. Now, I could go on. I haven't even touched on the Japanese players who missed out on their key formative years when we only look at Major League Baseball statistics, for example. Now, fortunately, though, there is a solution. You see, we don't just have to stand idly by and shrug our shoulders. We can do something about this problem, at least we can in OOTP. So, what did I do? I created a new Lefty Grove in my game. I created a Lefty Grove who starts his career in 1921. He starts off as a raw pitcher with some control issues, but a lot of potential. It's actually really easy. OOTP gives you the option to create players using the minor league database. And fortunately for us, OOTP's minor league database includes all of the great Orioles teams of the 1920s. Now, we don't necessarily need to do this for every single player, but there absolutely are some cases in which we ought to do something to honor the memories of these great players. After all, nobody deserves to be a footnote.